Oh my God, we're back again. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Packcast, the podcast where you don't, I do Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. The final episode of predictions, not only this season, but in this house, Grossi. And today, we are going to be breaking down and predicting the winner of Super Bowl 59 between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. Also want to do a big shout out and thank you to the NFL and YouTube for allowing me to use some footage on this video to break down the upcoming Super Bowl matchup. Last week, I went a resounding 1-1. I got the NFC Championship game right. Oh boy, that game was not as close as I thought it was going to be. And unfortunately, getting the Bills game wrong as the Chiefs, they just rolled over everyone once again to make it back to the promised land. I know that there's a lot of talk about this Super Bowl. And quite honestly, a lot of hardcore fans, or at least just the buzz, is that there is going to be kind of a tuning out, right? And that this is not going to be the most exciting Super Bowl, the matchup. No one wants to see the Chiefs win 3 times in a row, except for the people who want to see the Chiefs win 3 times in a row. But looking just at this game as a football fan, I'm not going to lie, I think it's going to be an excellent game. So while there's the fact that it's a repeat Super Bowl again, we just had one last year, that I'm not super interested in. What I am interested in is that the fact that the Eagles team is a very different squad than you saw 2 years ago. Hell, even the Chiefs are a different squad. And so I think ultimately this is going to wind up being a great game, just like their first matchup was a couple of years ago. And so breaking down this game, you have some really interesting matchups. Of course, you have the run game of the Philadelphia Eagles going up against that Chiefs defense. Then you have both teams' pass rushes and both offensive lines having to accommodate for that. And ultimately, I think who's going to win this game, it's going to come down to defense, right? Let's take a look at the Philadelphia Eagles, for example. The Eagles have been absolutely phenomenal in this postseason, especially when it comes to turnover differential. They have had 0 turnovers on their side of the ball, and they have forced 10. That is pretty insane. Yes, they played 3 games, so they got an additional game on the Kansas City Chiefs. But the fact that the Eagles have not made any mistakes when it comes to turning the ball over in this postseason is one of the reasons why they have been winning these games, especially when they're closer games. And it's not just the turnover, they've also forced 10 sacks in the last 3 games in the postseason. So honestly, pretty damn impressive numbers. And they just did not have this kind of defense a couple years ago when they played the Chiefs. On top of that, the other weapon that they didn't have, Saquon Barkley. And he is going to be the talk of the town these next 2 weeks until we get to Super Bowl 59. What a phenomenal season, over 2,000 yards, had a chance at the rushing record, and it's honestly an awesome story for Saquon Barkley, unless you're a Giants fan, then you don't want to see him do well on a division rival. But the crazy stat is that in each of these 3 playoff games, the minimum that Saquon Barkley has had is 118 yards, and that came against the Green Bay Packers, where he didn't score a single touchdown. However, he lit it up against the Rams, rushing for over 200 yards. He lit it up against the Commanders, getting 3 touchdowns, and Saquon Barkley is a difference maker here. And I don't think he's going to be able to run all over the Kansas City Chiefs because I do think they have a pretty damn good running defense. But ultimately, Saquon, it's going to be impossible to contain him completely, and he is going to be a game changer here. On top of that, the Eagles really haven't required much from Jalen Hurts. Taking a look at his pass attempts, the most he had was 28, which was in the last game, and he had 20 and 21 respectively in the other 2 games. And for that, he's been pretty damn good. Like I said, he hasn't turned the ball over. A.J. Brown and him went off against the Commanders. Hell, they scored 55 points and, of course, 7 rushing touchdowns, which is wild. But Jalen Hurts, who gets very much overhated, I talked about this in the predictions episode, and I don't think that's really a hot take. I think just more Jalen Hurts is a very good quarterback. The question is going to be, how good is he going to be against this very good defense? You saw, for example, going up against the Rams, they were able to get a ton of pressure on that offensive line of Philadelphia. And for me with the Eagles, that's my number one area of concern. It is protecting Jalen Hurts. We see what their run blocking looks like, and it's pretty damn phenomenal, whether it's for Saquon, whether it's for Shipley or Jalen Hurts, but they have allowed 11 sacks in these last 3 games. Now, I will say 2 came from the Packers and 2 came from the Commanders. So the rest of them came against that Rams defense, which is very damn good, especially that defensive line. So while the Chiefs defensive line is not as sack heavy as the LA Rams, you still got to be a little bit concerned about that, because if they're able to put pressure on Jalen Hurts, that might increase the turnovers. And on top of that, if Saquon Barkley can't be leaned upon like he has been for these past 3 games, that is where the the Eagles could run into some issues. But on the flip side of things, let's talk about the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, heading into the AFC Championship game, they went 8 straight games without allowing a single turnover. They had one against the Bills in a fumble. But besides that, they have been ridiculously clean with the ball. On top of that, we mentioned the 10 sacks that the Eagles had in the past 3 games. They have 10 sacks in just the past 2 games. 8 of them, of course, coming against the Houston Texans. And I know the Texans O-line is not a great sample size because they're not a very good, strong unit this season, but still pretty damn impressive. And taking a look at what they did against the Bills, holy crap. Josh Allen was under pressure 45.9% of his dropbacks, and that was very evident in that game. You look at that final play from the Bills where he drops back and is completely under pressure. He's completely swarmed and just throws it up to Dalton Kincaid, which it was a good ball from Josh Allen, but with that additional pressure, he had no time to even look at other options, and that made it very difficult for Josh Allen to be super duper productive against the Chiefs. And of course, you got to give a ton of credit to Spags. He has just been phenomenal, and the consistency there for the Chiefs, I mean, there's a reason why they're going to yet another Super Bowl, their 5th in just 6 seasons. Now, we were talking about Saquon Barkley for the Eagles, but let's talk about this run defense for the Kansas City Chiefs. They allowed 147 rushing yards versus the Bills and 149 rushing yards against the Texans. So while that run defense is very good, it is not perfect. And if Saquon Barkley is able to rip off a chunk and control time of possession, they might be in a good spot here. The Eagles ranked 1st in time of possession in the NFL this year, which is pretty damn crazy. And if they're able to control the ball against the Kansas City Chiefs, you got to think that that's going to give Philadelphia an advantage. However, you look at some of the wins that the Chiefs have had this season, and they are not outgaining their opponents, whether it's time possession, whether it's rushing yards, hell, even if it's passing yards. But the Chiefs are still finding ways to win these ball games. And so ultimately, I think it's going to come down to which defense can generate the most pressure. You look at the left tackle position for the Kansas City Chiefs, and there is definitely some concern there. If the Eagles are able to generate pressure against Patrick Mahomes, this could be a really interesting matchup. And I got to be honest, I don't know if this is going to be the highest scoring game. We saw the Eagles scored 55 points against the Commanders. You had 2 dynamic offenses here. However, here, I think it's going to be a slow build, and maybe things are going to get let loose in the 4th quarter. But I imagine that this is going to be a hard-fought game and a game of inches. And so looking at this game, my gut reaction says I think the Eagles should be able to win this, right? They have the better run game, they have the better defense, and if they're able to control the clock like they've been doing all season, I think they should be able to get away with a win. I think Jalen Hurts is damn good enough to win the Super Bowl. I think what you saw him do with A.J. Brown was really impressive. Dallas Goedert has been crucial in these playoffs, and I think ultimately the Eagles have the kind of team to win the Super Bowl. We've been talking about this the entire postseason with a good defense and good run game. That is the recipe for success. However, you take a look at the Kansas City Chiefs, and you had to look at experience here. You look at Andy Reid, his 6th Super Bowl appearance. You look at Patrick Mahomes. The guy's worst season has been losing in the conference championship. You have Travis Kelce, who has not had the greatest season, but he's been doing pretty well in these playoffs, especially against the Houston Texans. And so you put all this together, and it's just a matter of, okay, even though the Eagles seem like a little bit more of a better built team this year, you have the freaking Chiefs. And ultimately, they have been able to win regardless of who they're going against, unless you're the Bills in the regular season or your starters are going against the Denver Broncos. And so, while I am definitely leaning Eagles, and I think they should win this game, I gotta know better, and I gotta go with the Kansas City Chiefs to three-peat. And you might be asking, Tom, why? What is your analysis besides all the things that you just said? And here's why. Because we don't deserve nice things. No, there is no more good in the world, only pain. And a Chiefs three-peat is taking it away from everybody else going, oh no, you can't win. So whether Andy Reid retires or Travis Kelce proposes and then retires, it doesn't matter because they will have won 3 Super Bowls in a row. And while they are not the first team to win 3 championships in a row in the NFL, so looking at you, Green Bay Packers, they will be the first team to win 3 Super Bowls in a row. And that will be painful. And while the Eagles, I think, can definitely get it done, and I will happily be wrong, I know better than picking against the Chiefs. And you might go, Tom, what do you mean? You just picked the Chiefs to lose against the Bills. No, I didn't. Prove it. Anyway, Chiefs win. Nothing is good. Meteor is coming for us. And may God have mercy on our soul. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who do you think is coming away with a win here? I'm very curious to see how Patrick Mahomes is going to move against this defense. See if guys like Worthy can get open. If DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown are going to make a difference here. And hey, Eagles, you're our only hope. Unless you're in the NFC East, then no one else wants you to win. But Eagles, you're our only hope. Let's get it. You know, it's time at TomGrossiComedy.com, and a huge shout out to all the patrons and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And before we get on out of here, I put up my first predictions episode in this house September 9th of 2017. Since then, I have put out a predictions episode every single frackin' week. And now, as I mentioned in the intro, this is the final predictions episode in this house. So I am so thankful to everyone who has followed along. I went back to the first predictions episode earlier today. There were 8 comments in there, I think a little over 1,000 views. And looking at weeks 2, 3, and 4, a couple hundred views. And the fact that this is even generating 100,000 views at this point, I appreciate the hell out of you. I obviously just do this for fun. I watch a ton of football and try to have a pulse on what's going on with every single fan base, and I'm making my best educated guess here. So I appreciate y'all just joining along for the fun. It's been an absolute pleasure doing these, and yeah, I know that some people are not the most happy about this Super Bowl and might be boring, but I just hope we have a damn good game and we send this house out right. But appreciate the hell out of you folks. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi, and as always, go Pack, go.